It's good to be back in Oklahoma. Good to be back in Joshua. Here you had a good class last week, and we're ready to start in chapter 22. Yeah, right. Say, wait a minute, we were here last week. I don't remember that. Just a couple of questions by way of review and introduction into what we're going to talk about tonight in chapter 10. What happened at AI? Good news or bad news? AI, yeah, really. What were two reasons for the Israelites failing to take AI? Two reasons.
Well, they didn't consult God.
Okay, they didn't consult God. Actually, that's my second reason, but I'll take it as the first. What was the second?
Sin in the camp.
What's that?
Sin in the camp.
Sin in the camp. Okay, Achan sinned, and that's why God did not bless them in taking Ai. That's why they failed, because God would not bless their progress if there was sin in the camp. And then, of course, the second one was they didn't consult God about Ai. They didn't say, Lord, we're about to go up against Ai. It's a small place, but we know we need your care. We need your concern. We need your providential guidance and provision. They didn't do any of that, and so they failed. And that's when they finally talked to God after they failed. If they'd have talked to God before they failed, they probably wouldn't have failed. So, Gibeon. Why was Gibeon so able to fool Joshua?
Well, they really planned it out well. I mean, they dressed for it. They left the food fire out.
Right.
Wineskins.
Yeah.
And then,
Why did it work?
Consult God.
They didn't consult God. There you go. If Joshua had said, okay, we got these Gibeonites here. Let me go talk to the Lord about this and see what's really happening, if this is legit. He didn't do that. They just went ahead and made a decision without consulting God. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing as far as what resulted, but it just shows it's not a good practice to make big decisions in life without consulting the Lord first. Billy?
I was going to say, the congregational men's want to consult with them first. And of course, Joshua asked them, how do we know you're not among us, whatever? But they made agreement with them that we won't kill you or whatever. And then Joshua, when he had an opportunity there, about latter part of chapter 9 there, they said, do unto us what you think is right. Well, he should have wiped them out for lying to him and everything like that. But yet they cursed him and whatever, made them always of wood and water, and let them go ahead and live, you know. But again, he didn't consult God on the situation, and Joshua was kind of caught between the hard place here, because we've made an oath with God, we won't kill these people, and you're our leader now, we got to acknowledge our oath, you know.
Right. That's what happens to us when we fail to ask God for guidance in our decision-making process. We get caught sometimes making decisions that we probably shouldn't have made. And I'm not saying you're going to get a letter from God telling you detailed information on what to do every day. That's not what I mean. But I am saying we are much less likely to make dumb decisions if we're in constant communication with the Lord about the way our lives are going. He has ways of helping us understand which directions we should and should not go in life. And what's the old saying? The Lord works in mysterious ways, meaning we don't understand it. Well, duh, of course we don't understand it. He's God, and I'm not. And so I should always be asking him about every decision that we're making. What decisions do we normally reserve to say, okay, I'm going to pray to God about this one? What are some of those decisions?
Let's say maybe your
Marriage. Job. Okay, you've had two answers. That's enough for you. Okay.
children, where you work, where you live, you know.
What about children?
Talk to God about children, you know.
Everything about
everything.
Everything about children, yeah. Should we have any? Yeah. How many? Yeah, should we allow them to live? I like that one. How long?
Does anybody want one?
Can I give them away, Lord? Bless other people with my prosperity and childbearing. Yeah, see, there's all kinds of questions that comes up. And of course, children, by the time you have children, you really start talking to God, which is, I think that's part of his master plan. I was going to say on-the-job training. OJT. We used to talk about OJT a lot. We don't do that much, and we should as Christians because you get a lot of it on the job training. When you buy a house, a big financial expense. When you buy a car, a big financial expense. When you take a new job, a big financial question mark. Everything that concerns our finances, we go, man, I really need to talk to the Lord about this because I don't want to lose any money.
So that sometimes we think, well, I need to be talking to God now.
Yeah.
I've been talking to him way before now.
Absolutely. What decision is small enough in life that you really don't need to talk to the Lord about it? Okay, that's the attitude that we need to develop in ourselves. There's really nothing that we need to agonize over that we don't need to talk to the Lord about. If you're really working, struggling with it, talk to the Lord. Talk to the Lord. And I can't say how he's going to answer you. I can't see how you're going to learn or figure out what the right thing is to do. But I am saying that when I look at the scriptures, he promises us a response. If we pray to him in secret, he will reward us openly. And God, like us, we don't want our children making dumb decisions. And we're trying to figure out as parents, well, should I tell them? Should I tell them that's dumb? Because I know my kid, and if I tell them that's dumb, that's probably what they're going to do. And okay, now I got to think this through. How can I work with other people to get them to do the thing that's right? And God is always wanting to help us do the thing that's right. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because if there's a lesson in here, I think it is that we need to be in constant touch with the Lord. What had just happened at Jericho? Who did that?
God did.
God did that. And now it's like, oh, yeah, it's not a big deal. We can do this on our own. No. These Gibeonites, oh, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't expecting this. They kind of showed up out of nowhere. I don't know what to do about this. Well, what should I do? Well, I'll make a decision here on my own. No. I don't think Joshua consciously decided he was going to make a decision on his own, but that's what he did. We need to make conscious decisions before the time of questions comes. We're going to talk to the Lord. It needs to just be a habit. It needs to just be a habit. Anything else on that? Yes, PJ.
I just don't understand, because Joshua had the Lord's ear. He could talk to him, and he talks directly back to him.
Sure.
Why in the world would he not take advantage of that? I mean, I pray about things, and I hope I make the right decisions, but I'm not sure a lot of the times, whether it's the right thing to do or not.
Right.
I hope it is. But he had the direct ear, and he just didn't even use it.
I know. You ever watch a game show, and while you're watching the game show, you're going, it's number 7. Anybody knows it's number 7. Why don't you pick number 7? You ever do that watching a game show? And they're not paying attention. And then it's your turn to be on the game show. Or you're watching TV and they're playing football or they're playing basketball, and you're saying, guard that guy, get on that guy, he's in the open. By the way, they can't hear you. If they're on the TV, they can't hear what you're saying. From our perspective, it always seems easy, doesn't it? And then you find yourself there. And I wonder, what if there were people observing my life? There's a big stand of people. Boy, that would be a boring show. But it's just, you think about it. I'm going through my day to day. If there was a stand full of people with popcorn and drinks and they're watching my life, what would they be yelling at me? Yeah. See, that's the way it is. And I look at Joshua and I think, man, he should have known better. Duh. Well, he's in charge of 3 million people at least, and their welfare in a brand new land with hostile environment. I know, that's it. I know, it just seems so simple and obvious to me that that's what he should have done. And maybe the reason all this has happened and it's come about and it's been put in the book is so Marty can read it today, 3,500 years later, and go, oh, I need to talk to God. I need to be in constant contact with my Creator so he can help me through this life. Yeah.
Back to the theme of the book.
Yes.
Be strong, be courageous, trust in me.
Don't be afraid.
Do what I tell you to do.
Right. Well, finally here in chapter 10, what happens is, well, let's just read the first 5 verses. Let's read the first 5 verses and kind of get on board with what's going on in chapter 10 and the Gibeonites. Who wants to read for us? First 5 verses of chapter 10. PJ.
Now when it came about when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had captured Ai and had utterly destroyed it, just as he had done to Jericho and its king, so he had done to Ai and its king, and that the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were within their land, that he feared greatly because Gibeon was a great city, like one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all its men were mighty. Therefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent word to Hoham, king of Hebron, and to Piram, king of Jarmuth, and to Japhia, king of Lachish, and to Debir, king of Eglon, saying, Come up to me and help me, and let us attack Gibeon, where it has made peace with Joshua and with the sons of Israel. So the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon, gathered together, and when that they with all their armies encamped by Gibeon and fought against it.
Okay, so who's being attacked? The Gibeonites, the guys that just made a deal with Israel. It's like World War II, pre-World War II, where the Czechs make a pact with England, say, hey, if Germany attacks us, you're going to jump in here? Oh, yeah, we'll jump in there. Poland, all those Warsaw Pact countries, and then Germany starts taking countries, and oh, man, what are we going to do? Well, I guess we're going to go to war. Except it was a little different here, because who's attacking Gibeon? 5 other kings, and they're specifically said to be, in verse 5, the kings of, does that name ring a bell? The Amorites?
In 19 says, utterly destroy the Amorites, the Hittites, the Hivites, Jebusites, all these people that weren't utterly destroyed.
Right, that's Deuteronomy. Even farther back. Not ring a bell farther back? Genesis 15. Who's God talking to in Genesis 15? Talking to Abraham. Says, I'm going to bring your offspring. You don't have any kids right now, but don't worry about that. We're going to fix that. I'm going to bring your offspring, because there are going to be millions of them, into this land. But it won't be for about 400 years, because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Not yet complete. So
Is that their sin, their disgusting, their desolation of the country and everything? That's what's not complete?
right.
God can now destroy these people?
Right. In Romans chapter 2, Paul talks about storing up wrath for the day of wrath. And he's warning the reader, listen, you need to repent because the day of wrath is coming. And this is what the Amorites had been doing now for at least 400 years. But they must have started before that, because God is saying to Abraham, the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. In other words, they must be iniquitous now, not ubiquitous, but iniquitous. Maybe they were ubiquitous all over Canaan, but they were iniquitous as well. And so they had been bad, and they're getting worse. And God says, by the time your children go in there, we're going to need to wipe them out, because their cup of iniquity is going to be overflowing. And that's going to be the judgment that comes on them. So when people tell you, oh, God is an evil God because he had the Israelites to slaughter people when they went into the Canaan land. No, God is a just God, because their judgment had been waiting 400 years, and God is just now bringing that judgment down on their heads. As a matter of fact, not only that, but why don't these 5 kings get together in a federation, have a meeting, and say, listen, it's obvious that what's happening with the Israelites is of God. Why don't we do the smart thing like the Gibeonites did and go to them and tell them, we want to learn to follow your God. Right. Could you imagine people doing that today? Can you imagine people today saying, listen, you know, all this crazy stuff that's going on in the world, we don't even know what sex, what bathroom we're supposed to be. We don't even know what pronoun we're supposed to use to talk to people. We need to go to the people of God and find out what the really right way to live is. Yeah. It's not going to happen. Jesus did not come and establish his church so that the church could change the world to be more like heaven. Jesus came into this world to establish his church so that there would be an ark, just like there was an ark in Noah's day. The purpose of the church is to keep building the church so that it will be solid and stable when the judgment day comes, and as many people as would can come into it for salvation. But the purpose of the church is not to change the world to become, you can't read that in the scriptures. We're supposed to be lights. We're supposed to be cities on hills. We're supposed to be salt. But Jesus didn't say, go out and change the world to be like heaven. He said, go preach the gospel. He who believes and is baptized will be saved. Be saved from what? Be saved from the world. Be saved from their sin. Be saved from the evil. Just like it was in Noah's day. He was a preacher of righteousness. But when the flood came, there were only 8 in the ark. So, well, we got the Amorites attacking the Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites are saying, hey, man, Joshua, you got to come help us now. By the way, it's not cheating to skip over to chapter 11 and look at verse 20. And we're still, by the way, talking about the Amorites and their destruction that takes place in the intervening passages. It says in chapter 11, verse 20, for it was of the Lord to harden their hearts to meet Israel in battle in order that he might utterly destroy them, that they might receive no mercy, but that he might destroy them just as the Lord had commanded Moses. So they had hardened themselves against God, and so God said, all right, I'll harden your heart to the point where you're just going to do the stupidest thing you can. This is Romans 1 as well. When people exchange the truth of God for a lie, and they worship and serve the creature more than the Creator, what does God do according to Romans 1? Well, go there. What? Romans chapter 1. I'm talking fast, so you have to listen fast. And this is, people talk about, oh, that Bible's old and it's ancient and it's been translated all these different times and changed so many times through the years. No, this is the most current book I know, still. Let's start Romans chapter 1, verse 21. Even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile. I like to pronounce it that way. Futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. That's what the Canaanites had been doing for years. It says, therefore God gave them over in the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. Little parenthetical statement here. If you read in Deuteronomy, the sexual sins that God forbids among the Israelites, he talks about all those, he describes all those, and he says, these are the things that the Canaanites have done, and this is why the land is spewing them out. So when Paul writes about this, he's writing about the natural tendency of people who give up God to become sensual and sexual in all their imaginations. What's happening in our country today? Sensuality and sexuality in all imaginations. To the point where everybody thinks, oh yeah, you can have sex outside of marriage. That's no big deal. Fornication, what's that? We don't even use the word anymore. Anyway, that was supposed to be a parenthetical statement, not a sermon. So back to verse 25. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them over to degrading passions. For their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And in the same way also the men abandoned the natural function of the woman and burned in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper. And then he goes on to describe some of those things. But when God gives you over to a depraved mind, it's because that's what you've been pursuing without repentance. It's okay. You want that? You can have that. You want to smoke? Here's a pack. Here's 2 packs. You're going to smoke them right now. Till you get sick. That's what God does. So, that's what's going on here in chapters 10 and 11.
Let them continue to do this because they knew the way they're going. It's the same way when he did with Pharaoh, when he hardened his heart not to let the people go.
Same thing.
You know, it's the identical same thing. And he kept coming back and saying, let my people go, let my people go. And he said, no. And then he says, let them go. And he let them go, and then he ran them down and tried to kill them, and God had to take care of the situation.
He wasn't doing anything that Pharaoh didn't want to do. Pharaoh didn't go, oh, no, I'll feel bad about this. No, he didn't feel bad about it. That's what he wanted to do. His heart was hard towards that. And that's what Paul warns about. Having your conscience seared as with a hot iron. That's what Paul speaks about. And he's talking about those who are continually involving themselves in sin to the point where it doesn't seem like sin anymore. It's just normal.
Example of that, once I fell on the stove, hit my hand and burned it, and it burned it good to where you didn't have no feeling in it. Well, the next time I did that, it didn't hurt. I thought, what's the deal in that? Well, it's because it's seared. But after it started healing, repenting of your sins or whatever, and you start coming back and you do that again, it hurts again.
Yeah, it's supposed to hurt. There's a reason why we have nerve endings all over our body that tells us when we're doing something dumb and it's hurting. Like this, what is that show where they take two people out in the wilderness and they take all their clothes away from them and now they have to survive for 3 weeks out in the wilderness with nothing. It's like, no. Yeah, Naked and Afraid, yeah. Yeah. Really? Yeah. We're going to be started. Oh, well. I just want to point out to you chapter 10, verse 7. Joshua went up from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the valiant warriors. Where's Gilgal? What's Gilgal all about? Why is it named Gilgal? What does Gilgal mean? Gilgal means a rolling. What was rolled at Gilgal? All right, go back in Joshua. I didn't do a good job. Chapter 5, Joshua chapter 5. Verse 8. When they had finished circumcising all the nation, they remained in their places in the camp until they were healed. And then the Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. So the name of that place is called Gilgal to this day. What does Gilgal mean? Rolling. What was rolled? The reproach of Israel, the reproach that they had from being in Egypt, that was rolled away at Gilgal. So they leave Gilgal to go fight this battle for the Gibeonites. Rolling away their reproach is the name, and they leave the place of rolling away their reproach, and that's where they're going to come back to later. Chapter 11, let's see. Where does it say that? I thought I wrote it down. Well, anyway, just take my word for it. Yeah, you love it when a preacher tells you that, don't you? Where does it say that, for crying out loud? Anyway, they returned to Gilgal at some point. Oh, duh, it's right there in chapter 10, verse 15. Joshua and all Israel with him returned to the camp to Gilgal. That's right there. I was looking too far ahead.
Well, chapter 9 says, Joshua came one of them suddenly by marching all night from Gilgal.
Right. Marched all night from Gilgal. And look what it says in verse 10. The Lord confounded them, their enemies, the Amorites, confounded them before Israel, and he slew them with a great slaughter at Gibeon, and pursued them by the way of the ascent of Beth-horon, and struck them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. And they fled from before Israel while they were at the descent of Beth-horon. The Lord threw large stones from heaven on them as far as Azekah, and they died. And there were more who died from the hailstones than those whom the sons of Israel killed with the sword. Now, here's a question. Oh, I'm sorry, chapter 10, verses 11 and 12, yeah. 10 and 11. Don't want me to read it again? I didn't make it clear. So why didn't God just say, okay, Joshua, you guys hang out. I'm going to go over here and send some hailstones on the Amorites and wipe them out? Why not? Couldn't he have done that?
Israel will be faithful to him, to believe, be of good courage, don't be afraid. I'm going to do this. I'm giving them to your hand. Trust me. Whether I can do it for you and help you by hailstorms or send you in battle and you'll destroy them yourself, I am still with you.
Okay. Well, why didn't he just bring them up to where they could see what he was going to do? Okay, now you've come all this way, and now I'm going to wipe them out for you. Watch me wipe them out.
He did it for the other nations around him, realized that God is with those people.
Okay? Do you ever just want God to do something for you? Only all the time. And he's saying, get to work. You got stuff to do. I'm going to help you. What did Jesus say? The last verse of the Gospel of Matthew. What did he say?
Lo, I'm with you always.
Yeah, be with you always. So he's with us now. He's got stuff he wants us to do. When we go about doing his stuff, where's he going to go? He's going to go with us. When you think to yourself, I need to work with my children to help them understand how good God is and how they need to learn words as they're learning to talk like Jesus in the Bible. Where's God going to be when you're training your children in those ways? He's going to be with you. He's going to be with your children. He's going to be helping you do that. What about when you see your neighbor, their yard needs to be mowed. They don't have the means to mow their yard. Maybe they're sick or whatever. Or maybe Jack and Verna Van Way need a meal. And you say, wow, I could fix a meal for them. Where's God going to be when we're doing that kind of stuff? He's going to be right there with us. So service in the kingdom, if you want to be close to the Lord, there you go. Do the stuff that he's asked you to do, the things he lays at our feet, and we're going to be like Joshua. We're going to be going into battle. I'm going to win this battle for the Lord. He said, no, you're not. I'm going to do it for you. But you go ahead because I want you to be here. And he does stuff for us all the time that we don't even realize. And when I read this, there's not a verse that says, okay, here's what you're supposed to learn from this, Marty. You just read it, and there's a reason why God is providing this. It's because he wants us to understand from what he records for us, this is the way I work. This is the way I do things. This is the way I care for my people. This is the way I provide. And it's on every page of the scriptures. He says in verse 8, chapter 10, verse 8, do not fear them. I've given them into your hands. Not one of them shall stand before you. Joshua says to his people in chapter 10, verse 25, do not fear or be dismayed. Be strong. Where did he get that idea? Well, God told him, so he's telling them. Thus the Lord will do to all your enemies before whom you fight. All right. I'm not sure how much time we've got left, but look at chapter 10, verse 28. He's going to go through all of the cities that these 5 kings have come from and a few more. And look what it says. Joshua captured Makkedah on that day and struck it and its king with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed it and every person who was in it. He left no survivor. Verse 30, talking about Libnah now. He left no survivor in it. In verse 32, talking about Lachish, it says, he struck it and every person who was in it with the edge of the sword. Verse 33, Horam, king of Gezer, came up to help Lachish, and Joshua defeated him and his people until he had left him no survivor. I guess they were a bunch of old guys. King of the Gezers came up to fight. But none of them made it through the battle. Okay. It's not like in the New Testament where you got the Listerines from the city of Lystra that smelled good all the time. Anyway, well, they smelled, what's the word? Oh, forget it. Eglon in verse 35, they captured it on the day and struck it with the edge of the sword. He utterly destroyed that day and every person who was in it. Verse 37, talking about Hebron, he left no survivor. Chapter 39, talking about Debir, he left no survivor. Verse 40, once again, he left no survivor. Continues into chapter 11, verse 8. He attacked Mizpah to the east and struck them until no survivor was left of them. What's happening? What's Joshua doing? He's doing exactly what God said. They've been wicked for hundreds of years. They've not changed. They've united themselves against you, knowing that you are my people. Wipe them out. Wipe them out.
To cleanse the land, because this is going to be a land of inheritance.
A land of what?
A land of inheritance to the people.
Yes.
The Israelites. And it can't be desecrated or defile or anything like that. That's why he's saying wiping this out. If it's their gods or whatever they're doing, wipe it out to cleanse it, so when you inherit it from God, you've been blessed with a new land or whatever.
Now, why didn't the Israelites attack north and east over to present Iraq and Iran? Why didn't they go south and take Egypt back now that they had this kind of power? Why didn't they take all the way down to Ethiopia and the kingdoms of Cush? Why didn't they do that? God said, here's where I want you. Here are your borders. This land belongs to you. The people who are in it, they have not lived well. They should have. They knew better. Where did those people come from? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Where? Okay. They came from Canaan. Who was Canaan? Grandson of Noah. These people knew about God. I have every faith that they believed, or they knew about God sufficiently to believe, or God wouldn't have been able to hold them responsible for what they did. They know, they knew, and they're guilty.
400 years here, have no other gods, protect, before him, this, whatever, trust him, tear down the idols and stuff. And as they're moving through the Red Sea and now going into the promised land, Canaan, and where they're at now, they're still saying the same thing. Joshua was telling the same thing Moses said, have no other God before you. They know who God is.
Right. And it's the same thing Israel is going to do as they move forward in their history, in their timeline. They're going to become so corrupt by means of idols, which is just dumb. Because they're wiping out all these nations who trusted in those idols because of the true and living God, and then they're going to turn back to those idols. But you read about it, it's all about sensuality. It's not about spirituality, it's about sensuality. Art.
In Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, it says, I believe it says about the Israelites, and this was far after Joshua, long after, it said that the people could not blush.
Right. They'd forgotten how to blush, forgotten how to be ashamed. That sounds like today in many ways. All right. Let's see. 11:1. Oh, we've covered all this, yeah. Verse 6, point that out again. And you might like to do what I do. I try to mark things that are recorded consistently and over and over and over again. So in chapter 6, verse 11, what's said that's been said several times already? Chapter 11, verse 6. You can read it. That's not cheating.
Do not be afraid.
Do not be afraid. There it is again. Do not be afraid. Why in the world would God just keep saying this?
Apparently they're not getting it.
Well, there's a lot of opportunity for fear.
How many crises has God brought you through in your life already? Now, logically speaking, you enumerate all of those things that God has brought you through. You're still alive. You're still breathing. You got something going for you. And all the stuff that you worried about in your childhood, in your teen years, in your college years, if you're older than college age, not all of you are. But everything you've worried about, He's brought you through. What should be our conclusion about the next crisis?
It's true.
Well, duh. But what do we tend to think? Oh, man, this is going to get me for sure. How am I going to do it? And you just keep reading this book, and it's like, Joshua, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't be afraid. I'm with you. If you ever wake up one morning and God says, be afraid, man, that's not going to happen unless we leave Him, because He's always going to be telling us, don't be afraid. I am still God. It's a new day, but not for me. It's a new day for you, but not for me. I'm on the other end of time. God being in eternity is not limited by time, and eternity is not time. God is in eternity, and he spoke time into existence when he spoke the creation into existence. And we've got time, space, matter. All of that is limited, and it's going to be gone eventually when the Lord comes back. And everything will revert to, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but we're going to be in eternity, one way or the other. And eternity is not time. I don't understand eternity. I've never been in eternity, but I know it's not time. But when we describe eternity, how do we normally do it? We use time references. Yeah, forever. We'll use that. Eternity's a long time. No, eternity is not time. We know what a long time is, and that's why I think we have trouble with eternity, because we think of it in terms of time, but eternity is not time. It's eternity.
We have no concept of anything outside of time. So.
Right. What I know is that's where God is. And he says, I'm bringing you here. And I'm going, yeah, that's what I want. If that's where he is and he wants that for me and he's prepared that for me, that's where I want to go. I don't have to understand it. I'm looking forward to it. I think you are too. All right. Chapter 12. We have tonight and we have next Wednesday. And it's going to be tough to cover the next 13 chapters, because we got 24 chapters in this book. But we will talk about some of the highlights. Yeah, read ahead. Exactly. I was just about to say, read ahead, and if there's anything you want to discuss in the balance of the book before we finish this class, be ready to bring it up next week, Lord willing. And we will do our best to talk about it. I said chapter 12. Chapter 13 is really where we need to go.
The list of the kings defeated, there's 31 different kings.
Okay.
And yet they all cooperate with each other. Let's go down and whip Israel. Let's go down and whip 5 of them different at a time, 5 here, 5 there, 5 here, 5 there. And they didn't learn the fact that God's on these people's side. We can't beat them.
Right.
Destroying, through God's help, 31 different kingdoms.
And how much of that was God hardening their hearts because they were able to be hardened? So, just like a bull in that red cloth. I don't know if a bull can see red cloth. I know that's what the matadors use. They hold that cloth out there and they wave it, and what's the bull do? It's just his nature. He's going to charge it. So that's what God does with these Canaanites. Let's see. Just kind of breaking into a thought here. Verse 11, in Gilead, this is chapter 13, verse 11, and Gilead and the territory of the Geshurites and the Maacathites and all Mount Hermon and all Bashan as far as Seleka and all the kingdom of Og and Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He alone was left of the remnant of the Rephaim, for Moses struck them and dispossessed them. But the sons of Israel did not dispossess the Geshurites or the Maacathites, for Geshur and Maacah live among Israel until this day. Yeah. Why is that? I second.
Same reason they didn't pray before they went up to Ai.
Okay. I don't know. God gave this country to Israel, but it was up to them to take it. And somewhere along the way, with regard to these two peoples, they evidently failed to take it. And so these folks were left among them. That was not the will of God, but it was something he allowed. And these people became thorns in their sides, just as it was prophesied would happen. So when God gives us a job to do, his intention is for us to complete it all the way, to go thoroughly with it. And if we back off, it's not going to be as good as it could have been.
Same as Anakim, or were they both giants?
Yes, let me just give you a couple of passages on that. I can get my glasses adjusted here. Deuteronomy, where is it here? Chapter 2, 10 to 11. Let's see, who's got that? Yes, Deuteronomy 2, 10 and 11.
The men lived there formerly, a people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them men.
Okay. And then the same chapter, verses 20 and 21.
Is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim. The Rephaim formerly lived in it, but the Ammonites called them
Yeah.
Zum Zum Zum.
Zum.
A people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place.
All right. Now, Numbers chapter 13. Did you catch that it said of those people they were tall? Hold on here. Numbers 13, 32 and 33.
So they gave out to the sons of Israel that report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land from which we have gone and spied it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight.
So, how do they compare themselves to these guys? Like grasshoppers. They were pretty good sized guys. If you look, well, I don't know if they were that tall. It doesn't give any dimensions for these guys. But if you look back in chapter 11 of Joshua, verse 22, it says, there were no Anakim left in the land of the sons of Israel, only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod some remained. Who was from Gath that figures into this? Goliath was from the city of Gath. How tall was Goliath according, how tall? At least 9, probably more like 9.5. Yeah. Now we see pictures of people who have, what do they call it, giantitis, or it's a condition. Gigantism, yeah. And they're tall and they're big.
I knew one years ago, Jim Palmer, Guinness World Book of Records. I forget how high he is.
Yeah.
I thought it was, he had ducked, turned sideways a little bit, stand up, I'm almost up to elbow. He put his hands on my back, and we're not getting his fingers like that, much wrapped all around.
Oh, wow. Most people who have that condition are not strong, they're not in good shape, and they don't live very long. He didn't? Yeah. But Goliath had a spear whose head weighed about 16.5 pounds. That's like a bowling ball on the end of your spear. What do you do with the spear? Can you imagine throwing a weaver's beam with a bowling ball on the end of it, and that's what you use to throw at people? His armor, the mail that he wore, was about 156 pounds. That was me going into the service in 1974. 156 pounds. Went into basic and came out 165 pounds. Now I'm 200, none of your business. So, but could you imagine putting on, just the coat of armor that you're putting on is 156 pounds. I heard that, Amy. Yes.
It says that Og, king of Bashan, in Deuteronomy 3,
Yeah.
that his bedstead was 9 cubits long.
Right. So, how much is a cubit?
1.5, 18 inches.
Yeah, 18. So 9 times 1.5. Yeah. Of course, he had all his kids and his dogs in there in bed with him. But, no, when it says his bed was that long, what's the obvious implication? He was a big guy. Yeah. So when we're reading about this, and you imagine being one of those spies going into Israel, you had to have some degree of faith like Joshua and Caleb had faith. They look at those guys and say, all right, we can take them, no problem, we got God on our side. Or rather, as Abraham Lincoln said, we are on God's side. That's the way it works. Anyway, Lord willing, we'll come back and we'll cover the last part of Joshua and bring anything you want to cover as you have read ahead. Class dismissed.